All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Tiverton Town Council special meeting of July 23rd. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. John, if you have our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands
one nation,
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Most.
Madam Clerk, would you like to call the roll?
Councillor Edwards.
Present.
Councillor Hilton.
Present.
Councillor Cook.
Present.
Councillor Clark.
Present.
Councillor Driggs. Councillor Perry.
Present.
Councillor DeMedeiros is absent at this time.
So the purpose of this meeting tonight is to review our budget in light of the most recent budget committee estimates regarding the tax levy for next year. Even assuming level funding for the schools and with significant cuts that have been made, the current budget is still $1.3 million above the 4% cap, which is pretty staggering when you think about it. Because again, you know, it's well over the present cap, and we are still looking for cuts of $1.3 million just to get it below the cap. And this is, again, you know, pretty much a direct result of the loss of the casino revenue and, you know, the decision to put casino revenue into the operating budget. And the thing that, you know, many of us feared happening has actually happened. So we could leave all of the work to the budget committee to try and sort this out, or we could, knowing that it will be the council that will have to manage this next year, take a look at our budget and see if we can agree or, you know, sort of go along with some of the recommended budget committee cuts, or whether or not we think that those particular items are too critical. And secondly, whether or not we can find additional cuts that we think the council could live with, as opposed to, you know, potentially cuts that aren't going to be that easy to manage around. You know, it's a rotten, terrible situation that we find ourselves in. But the loss of that casino revenue in the operating budget it's a pretty devastating thing. So
I have one point of order.
Yes, Donna.
It seems to be skimmed over is the fact that the contract, or whatever you want to call it, with the state was very poorly done. And that has left us in there where they had an out, where they didn't have to pay us, because even if it was closed for an hour, we would have been out money because of the way that is stated. So to keep saying something that I don't know if it would affect her anyway, and I don't know how it's affecting Lincoln, because they do it a little bit different, how they're affected. But definitely the way that contract, it's not a contract. I just can't think of the name of it.
Donna, well, I'll clarify. It's not a contract. It was written into the state law. It's general law. We didn't have an option in how that law, you know, was written and adopted by the General Assembly. That's where the minimum was. However, I will say this, that language, that legal language existed before the voters of Tiverton voted, you know, to allow the casino. And there were people who were aware of that language and were concerned about that language, that it wasn't secure enough, that it offered, you know, too many loopholes. But, you know, Twin River was down here marketing, the state was down here marketing, people were just, you know, $3 million, guaranteed $3 million, and maybe more, guaranteed $3 million. So at the end of the day, the voters voted for it. But but the worry about that language existed even before the referendum on having the casino in Tiverton. Donna, I'm sorry, Nancy, and then I'll get to John.
Yep. Go ahead, John.
Can you hear me? Because people seem to be freezing on my end, but
We
can
can hear
everyone
you.
hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I guess I have a really basic charter question. Granted, this COVID-19 has been the particular crisis of this year, but every year there are things that come up. And under our charter, it's the budget committee who sets the budget, and then the town has to deal with what the budget committee comes up with and the voters vote for
That's correct.
at the FTR. So what now are we inserting ourselves where is the budget committee in coming up with their budget right now, and why is the town council getting involved at this point?
Mike, did you want to say something?
So, good question. And so the budget, Chris can answer where the budget committee is because he's been going to those meetings. I have not. But however, I did speak to the chair of the budget committee, I think the day before yesterday. And you're right. The budget committee does, has the right to set the absolute budget for the town, subject to voter approval. But I think the budget committee chairperson is actually taking a very proactive view and saying, look, we could slash together a budget right now and make cuts and add things that may not make sense. But I want to be we want to be a good partner with the town. And therefore, I'm willing to, listen to what the town might have to say, so that, the town council is the one and the administrator has to live with that budget. But I think they're just kind of reaching out for some guidance from the elected people who are actually going to have to live within the budget before their final budget is proposed. So they're looking for input. So I think it's a good thing that they're doing that. You're right, they have the final say, but nothing prevents them from seeking advice from the people who are actually going to have to administer this budget and putting it together. So that's kind of where I think is one of the motivating reasons for this meeting, so that the budget committee can get some additional input, because the budget that this council passed back in, I think, February or March was obviously pre-COVID, and so things have changed a lot since then.
I understand that, but Mike, it's my understanding that the town council has, and the budget committee have been, Jay Edwards in particular, budget committee Jay Edwards, have been having dialogue about, what should we do? Maybe don't do a budget now, maybe wait to see what happens. And the whole thing just seems really, really, really irregular to me, and I don't like it.
Okay, John?
Thank you, Madam President. So my question was actually for you as to how we wanted to go about doing this. Are we going to go section by section, line by line? Are we just going to take, open commentary from the council as to, areas where we think that, we might be able to suggest some savings back to the budget committee? And the reason why I ask is because I have a fear that this meeting is going to spin out of control, and it's going to become a, ad nauseum history lesson about, what's happened in the past.
Stop it, John.
Quite frankly, I want to move forward.
Excuse me, Nancy, John speaking. He has the floor. You're out of order. Interrupt him. Go ahead, John.
Out of order.
I just want to make sure that we're being expeditious with everybody's time. That's all.
So, John, I thought.
Point of order, madam. Can I please ask you to refrain from Edwards making any comments about it's going to turn into a history lesson? I'm tired of it.
It already has.
I'm gonna defer to our parliamentarian here, the solicitor. I do think that John has a point in raising a concern that we stay on topic. And I didn't find it particularly out of order. I do think that, under Robert's rules, when one counselor has the floor and is speaking, they should not be interrupted.
Let's just stick to the agenda item on the budget, and let's go through it. Let's work together to get this done.
I am proposing that I would like the town administrator, who's been attending the budget committee meetings, to go through some of the budget committee's proposed reductions, and to see if there's consensus amongst the council that we think that those are reasonable and we could live with those. And then at the end, if any individual counselors have suggestions for additional cost savings, because as I said, even with the cuts that the budget committee has already made, they're still looking to cut another $1.3 million just to get under the 4% cap. So if everybody's amenable to that, I'd like to hand it over to Chris and let him talk about the reductions the budget committee is already proposing.
Okay. So the budget committee had already been, back in May, had made a number of iterations to the budget, not knowing where we were going and where the revenues are going to be. So the very first attempt they took at was to look at the revenues about 2 weeks ago, which in turn, they made some significant reductions with, after advice from both the treasurer and myself as to where some of those reductions, where we were seeing reductions in revenues. That in turn caused a huge cut into the flow of revenue that we'd be seeing for 2021 of about $3.5 million. So then the next step was obviously to start looking at expenditures. So I've been going to these meetings with them and discussing some of the issues that, the theory was, from the budget committee standpoint, was to take a look from the very worst scenario that they could come up with and then try to build back to something that might be workable. So if you look at the budget committee's July 16, 2020 docket, or July 16, 2020, you'll see that all the capital was stripped out with the exception of the recycling center. And I'll get to that a little bit later, but so there was basically no capital except for time payments. So anything that was already purchased and was on a schedule of time, they left those $229,000 worth of payments in there. So that was about $660,000 worth of cuts alone right there. The second major cut that was they took a look at was the paving. We dropped it from $500,000 down to $300,000, knowing that they would still have to do some issues around town, but maybe not a complete paving program like they have in the past year or so. That brought up to about $960,000. And then one of the issues they were looking at was vacancies. And there are 4 in the police department. There was a recommendation that 2 may be considered. And I will tell you, I did get a lot of flack about that. And after consultation with the chief and some others, it's would be my recommendation if we can to try to put those back. One of them was the SRO for the school, and that was recommended because the school had cut it out of their budget. But it turned out to be it's actually a contractual issue. So there were $140,000 in cuts there, but ultimately, if at all possible, I think the council would like to bring those back as well. That's obviously your discussion and your call. There were some minor salary cuts for the planner and town sergeant that went up to be about $4,000. There was a retiree pension who passed away this past year of about $8,000. There was some insurance monies that our rate came down of about $30,000 in savings. And then the last big item that was discussed was the school budget being level funded, which would bring about $600,000 of cuts into the budget. All told, it was about 1.7 million. And they're still woefully short. So there are some things, that, we should look at that would be helpful. I do know that, this whole issue about the landfill, the closure, the recycling center, and just the other discussion that took place was we actually did a lot better than what I thought we were going to do for FY 2020. I mean, the numbers aren't firm yet, but we had Denise, explain to the budget committee where we stood with the general fund reserve. And there was about $1.5 million, $1.6 million. Now she's still tabulating some of the bills that would be available. So they did take a swing at that and took $1 million out of the general fund reserve and was still 1.3 million short. So now it's try to look at some of the other issues. There is $100,000 worth of OPEB in the budget that you could take a look at. There is the increase in the land, the transportation for trash from 728,000 to 1.1 million. That would be the increase in the transportation and the tipping fees. If we get good news from DEM about at least extending that for, to do some of the issues that Tim Teese had discussed, I believe that would get us at least into 2021, FY 2022. So we'd be able to save that. And we also did discuss the issue of deferring the recycling center for some time to do it at the top of the landfill. And we believe we'll get relief with that as well. You would need some monies left aside to continue on with that project, whether it be to cut the road in and do the markings to get some of the trees down, but you wouldn't have to build the entire thing out right away. So we would want to make a good faith effort to show that we're still continuing. So there are some savings there as well. There are, I don't know what else in the budget that is a priority for you. And I was very uncomfortable going before the budget committee suggesting recommendations without your advice. So I would, at least like to be on the same page if at all possible.
So Nancy?
So I went through looking at stuff and I'll just throw it out and people can discuss it. A couple of things I came up with and one.
Well, Nancy, before we get to our ideas, I'd like to ask, of the things that the budget committee is proposing, are there any things? Chris mentioned the cut in police staffing, whether or not the council, is there anything that the council feels uncomfortable with in terms of cuts, and would like to, we don't, whatever we decide is not binding, as it was mentioned earlier. It's up to the budget committee. But I think if we have a consensus that we'd like to share with the budget committee that we'd prefer something not be cut, now is the time to say. So, John?
There was one other cut. I did miss it. It was the one position in DPW that's been vacant as well.
Okay.
So, and that was a $45,000 cut.
Okay, John?
So my two that I think would be a bad idea to cut would be the two officers. One being the SRO, because there is the contractual obligation that we have. So I think that those two should be put back in the budget. The other and in conjunction with that too, I think we had a good discussion with the chief surrounding the deputy chief position. I mean, given what's going on, I think that that's something we'd have to push to another budget, and that would essentially offset some of those, putting those two officers back in. We do want to make sure that we're taking public safety very seriously. The other one is the maintenance worker position, and I understand that it's the middle of the summer now. We don't necessarily need all these guys, and we're going to have no money really to pave. But my concern is that we have historically not been able to find contractors when it comes to snow removal. And if we're starting the year down a guy, that's a significant problem if we get one snowstorm. And everybody here on the council, we all know what it's like. If a road isn't paved or isn't plowed, the phones are blown up. So, I think that for $45,000, that's money well spent to get somebody in the door so that we're at least prepared for, what may happen with the weather when it gets to the winter time. So those are my two, I think, that should be back in the budget.
So let me just clarify. So the two police, you would like to keep the two patrolman positions?
Yes.
As well as the one DPW.
Yeah, and I think that you look at that finding for the two patrolmen, I think you offset that by, we just don't do the deputy chief position this time around.
Okay.
You offset it by what, John?
By removing the deputy chief line, not removing the line item, but removing the funding for that section. And I know that that's it's an important position, and ultimately that's something we should have.
Okay, Chris, can I interrupt you for a second? Because I just got a text from Denise that she's here, but she needs to get let in.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Meeting.
I did not see her.
So can you let her in?
I just did.
Okay. So that's John's recommendations. Denise, just to catch you up, we were going through the budget committee recommendations to see if there was any disagreement. John has noted that he would not like to lose the 2 patrol officers or the 1 DPW worker. Does anybody else have anything about the projected cut? Nancy?
Did you call me?
Yes.
Okay. So, Chris, when they talked, well, we all got your memo on meeting at the DEM about the recycling issue and the landfill. How realistic, as I recall, the recycling is $450,000, correct?
It broke up a little bit at the end.
It's, I think Denise's microphone's doing that thing again.
The recycling, as I recall, in the budget was about 450,000. Am I?
Correct.
So based on your memo with DEM, and thank you for sending that and about your discussion, how realistic would it be not to include recycling in this budget? That's a huge amount that would be very helpful if it's realistic.
It would be very, very helpful. But I still think that you should leave some monies to still show a continuation of trying to get pieces of that done, but not at the extent of 450,000.
Well, I think, just to clarify, originally there was $600,000 in there. And the budget committee has recommended cutting that back to 450.
Correct.
The rationale behind that, though, is there is monies in the industrial park
Right.
improvement fund that would help offset the road issue and the there's another piece of that. The water issue for the cisterns would be mitigated as well, instead of bringing in water lines all the way. So we think that there's about $100,000 there that you would be able to use for that. And some of the testing has already been done. So we've already expended some monies with par about where we are.
Is
Trish,
there?
what I understand though, if we do get an extension, it's just until July, am I correct?
It's
What?
It's just what, Denise? I didn't quite hear it.
If we get an extension, the hopes is that it'll bring us to July. Is that correct?
Well, my hope is that it gets us to July and hopefully a little bit longer. I don't know is the amount of landfill, amount of trash we would still be able to use to reshape that dome.
All right, because my point is we still have to, if it does get us till July, we still have to have plans for a recycle center by then.
We do, but of discussions that we took place, even with the councilman with Tim, if you recall, we talked about the possibility of still continuing doing recycling for a while, because the capping process is a staged process. And we would still be able to continue doing that at the top of the landfill until we get to that stage.
Okay, but how about the industrial park infrastructure fund? There's 407,000 in there. So if we use some of that to develop the road and do what we were planning here, then Nancy's probably right. You can't hear me?
It's your microphone's doing that thing again.
I can hear you, but it's awful, the static.
Denise, try turning it down just a little bit.
I'm way down. Trish.
Okay.
So the only monies we'd be able to use out of the industrial park fund would be for the road, because that's an improvement to the park. We wouldn't get any of the other money from the industrial park fund to do anything with the recycling center itself. Only the road aspect of it is what we'd be able to use it for.
The other thing about the infrastructure money that I would keep in the back of our mind is that, if I'm not mistaken, that road only has a binder coat on it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And if and when Bill sails, and we'd have to ask the DPW director, but when Bill sails, once they open up and they are bringing those big heavy trucks full of logs in everything there, I don't know whether or not we're going to have to put the top coat on it all the way down there, and whether or not those Denise, can you
Can't hear
mute
a
for a
thing.
second?
I cannot hear a thing.
I'm not sure once Bill's sales goes in and they're bringing those big logging trucks in, and you've got all those heavy trucks, whether or not we're going to have to put that top coat on, or can you run stuff that's heavy on just the binder coat without damaging it? I don't know the answer to that, but that top coat may have to go down out of that money sooner rather than later.
You're right.
If anybody knows more about that, that's good. John?
Well, I was just going to add, I mean, even with some of the top coat, like we have those water trucks that go in, the pool water trucks that go in and fill up in the industrial park, and they've already destroyed a huge chunk of that, of the road over there too, where it's all divoted and stuff from them parking their heavy loads there. So, it's going to have to be addressed if there's going to be big trucks going through there.
Yeah. Denise?
Chris, is the static better, guys?
Now,
Yes, I think so.
Well, you know what? I'm just gonna go on my phone then, all right?
if you just mute your speakers and stuff, you can still be seen, but just call in on the phone.
Okay.
So, are we comfortable? I'm sorry, Donna, go ahead.
I'm getting a little concerned that we're talking and talking and we talk ourselves into not doing any cuts.
I agree. I agree.
Well, we just started. If you'll just be a little patient, I was about to ask, is everyone comfortable with the budget committee's recommended reduction for the recycling center from 600 to 450, knowing that a portion of that 450 will come out of the industrial park fund? So is that it? We're comfortable with that one?
No, I think
I
it's
have a question there.
John?
So I guess the question's for the solicitor, but in the event that our budget item for call it 1.2 million for trash pickup actually doesn't really materialize into 1.2 million, would the council have the flexibility to repurpose some of those funds into capital, or is it, if it doesn't go into capital, it doesn't go?
I defer to the treasurer on that one, but I don't think so. If it's not budgeted for capital, you can't transfer it over.
So you can't just create it. So, because my thought would be that
No,
you take
Mike
the,
is right. Mike is right.
my thought would be that you do one of two things. Either you take the recycling center from 450 down to 0, and if we are good with the trash contract, you've got money above and beyond in the trash contract that we wouldn't be using to offset, or you take the trash contract down to what we're paying this year. Actually, whatever the extension is, the premium on the extension for that contract, and then you've got the money in the recycling center if we need it. I mean, one of those two things has to happen. I don't think we can budget for both and still be successful.
Although I do think that we are showing the DEM a good faith effort by continuing forward, is part of our plea to the DEM by continuing forward with the recycling center, which we're going to need eventually, that setting aside some funds to do that shows that we are serious about closing the landfill. Nancy.
I agree that we need to do some, but not 450,000. That's ridiculous in this what's going on right now. And I don't know what Chris would suggest, but I think they're well aware, and Chris seemed to make a very fervent and realistic argument about where we are financially. And I would be de minimis in what we set aside for recycling right now.
Chris, do you have a recommendation?
Is there a cop? Did you hear that?
Huh?
No,
Is
Chris.
there a scanner on?
What?
So I don't know what that should be. I would recommend at least a minimum of 100 just to have it to do some things. But I would suggest we wait until we start again. Can I ask who 2518 is? Because I'm going to remove you if you don't identify yourself. I thought it was Denise calling in, so
It's somebody with a scanner.
I'm just going to remove him.
Don't remove, they can just put it into the,
I'm disabling talking, that's all. They're
Okay.
over on the side. So if they want to speak, they'll raise their hand and identify themselves. So I would suggest we wait till we get to the end to figure out what, if you want to add money back to that.
Take it out. Take it to 100. Cut 350. Would be my suggestion.
Well, I don't think 100 is gonna get you much more than a little bit of engineering work.
Me either, but it's
And I do think you need to do something.
Okay.
Denise, what, I'll go to Denise and then we'll have a motion here before we talk this to death. Denise?
I can't dial in and be on this at the same time, so.
Well, you're nice and your speaker's nice and quiet now. So whatever you have, just
Well, I have to
whatever
tell
you did.
whatever
I
you
think-
did, leave it that way.
I didn't do anything. I think, Chris, what happened was whoever was on that line was causing it. Because even when I muted, I could still hear it. So I
Okay,
don't know.
we're all good.
I didn't do anything.
All right. Does
I don't
someone-
agree with bringing it all the way down to 100,000. I'm sorry, guys, but I've dealt with DEM and I don't care if I'm going to say this publicly or not, but I've dealt with them for the last 6 years over this, and they were adamant that we could not get an extension. Okay, I understand because of COVID, for some reason, all of a sudden we have more room up there, which I'm a little bit skeptical of at this point because of all the things I had heard in the past. But I still do, as a good faith effort, we need to keep a sufficient amount of money there because I'm telling you, if they are going to give us to July, I doubt they're going to give us much longer. So we're just putting off the inevitable. And as much as we can do up there as possible, we should do, because next year, we don't know if it's going to be any better. We don't know if COVID's coming back. We don't know what we're guaranteed to get next year from the casino. So I think that we should at least put 200,000 in there, at least, and start the progress up there. Because at some point, they're going to say enough is enough. And that's my concern.
I agree with Denise. Would anybody like to make a motion on a number that we can try and vote on? Denise? Denise?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying to mute myself so you don't hear anything. I make a motion of 200,000.
Is there a second? I'll second it. Okay, there's a motion and there's a motion and a second. So I'll take a roll call vote on suggesting that number be cut to 200,000. Joe Perry?
discussion first, Madam President, if you want to have additional.
Sorry, does anyone have another discussion item on that?
No, I think it's too high. I'd like to bring it down to 100,000.
Okay, John?
Ultimately, none of this is really binding because the budget committee is going to have the final say, and hopefully
Right.
they're watching this discussion and getting some ideas based off of what we're talking about. But and I agree that we ultimately are going to have to do something with the landfill. But the state's staring at a $600 million deficit themselves, with a structural deficit north of $200 million that goes out for years. So, in a perfect world, we would have gotten $3 million and we'd be able to use that towards the construction of the recycling center. And I think that when we had the initial discussions about locations and layout and all that stuff, it was predicated on the idea that the $3 million was going to offset some of these construction costs. Given the fact that we can't count on that money from the state, I don't think the state can count on us to properly fund the recycling center. I do think we should do something. But I think it should be, half of what Councilor DiMedeiros suggested.
I agree.
All right, any other discussion? Okay, in that case, I'm going to take a roll call vote. Councilor Perry? Joe?
You're muted, Joe.
What was it cut from, what to what?
The budget committee cut it from $600,000 to $450,000 already. And the proposed cut by Denise is to bring it down to $200,000.
Be in favor of that.
What did you say?
I'll be in favor of that,
Is,
cutting it 100.
is that a yes?
Yes,
You're breaking up. Okay. Steve,
Yes.
John,
Nothing set in stone. We can always come back if we need to cut more. So yes.
Donna,
No,
Nancy,
No,
Denise,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. So we'll let them, yes.
If I remember, because if I remember, we were taking that whole 650 out of the general fund to cover that. Do
And it
you
was,
realize-
being replaced by the casino money coming in.
Yes.
Right, so just keep that in mind as we go along, because that's important to note. And it's also important to note that I talked to the treasurer last week, and she's predicting the general fund will be $2 million over the 3%.
Well, yes.
No, so keep that in mind too. And that's without the casino money coming in. That's what we have there now. Now, just so everybody keeps that in mind also, that there is $2 million there. I've never been an advocate of bringing it down to 3%, but like Nancy just said, this is
Well, yes, although
So-
that's not what, just to be clear, it's not quite what's there now. And there's some sort of tax reconciliation that has to happen. So whether or not at the end of that, and I don't totally understand that, but some of that money is tax reconciliation money that won't actually be available for this year. So Denise said she's not quite ready to say what we might have over the 3%, but we will have some. But do keep in mind, based on resolutions that passed last year, 25% of what is left over, right, in the general fund has to go to paving, and 25% has to go to capital. So we don't have all of that. 50% of whatever's left over has to go to paving and capital, which means we don't have all that to put into the operating budget. Yes, Denise.
I brought that up to her, and she said that was taking all the restricted accounts out.
Well, I don't know, because I had the same
Well, I brought it
conversation
up
with
because
her.
I'm perfectly aware of that. And that's what she said was unrestricted to me, not restricted. And I brought it up. I said, well, there's also some restricted. And she said, yes. Now that was just my question to her. And I understood that was taking the restricted accounts out.
Okay. So we'll have to get that clarified, because I had a similar discussion, and that did include the money that would ultimately go to restricted funds. So we've taken a vote on that one. John, the other thing came up was the cut to the 2 patrol officers. So I don't know if the rest of the council feels strongly, if somebody wants to make a motion as to whether or not they feel strongly about the cuts to the 2 patrol officers. Nancy?
can I just ask a quick question on what Denise just mentioned that Denise Surratt said? So if Denise in fact said that we're 2 million over the restricted amount, the reserved amount that's due in the general fund, and how does that affect what we're really short of then? It sounds like we're not in as bad shape as we think we are.
Well, the budget committee's budget already includes taking $1 million of that and putting it into the budget. So you still need another 1.4.
A million of what? Patricia, I missed what you said. $1 million of it to what?
The budget committee in their budget is already proposing taking $1 million out of the general fund to try and cover the hole. So there's already $1 million that's being taken out. And while there'll be more than $1 million there, it's not really clear what the exact number will be based on when they do the tax reconciliation at the end. If there's more, then, and the budget committee proposes it and the voters adopt it, there may be more there, but no one knows exactly what that number is. And as you can see, there seems to be some difference of opinion as to whether or not, based on my conversation with the treasurer and Denise's, whether or not 50% of that is already being allocated to capital and road paving. Denise?
Denise seems to say no.
Get muted,
Well,
Denise.
I think we're going to have to ask the treasurer.
You're muted, Denise.
Denise, you're
You're muted.
muted.
Spacebar.
Don't quote me, because I have it all written down, but I could have misunderstood her. But keep in mind, Nancy, if we take everything we can up to 3% there, we'll only leave 3%. And I mean, I've never been an advocate of that. So that would have to be, in
Understand that.
my opinion, very desperate times.
Okay, can we get back to, stay on track here and get back to the two patrol officers? John mentioned that he felt strongly that we should keep the patrol officer positions in the budget. Does anyone want to make a motion? And remember, these are only just recommendations, but I'm doing it by vote so we can try and get some consensus and get through this.
Make that a motion. I'll make a motion.
To restore the two patrol officers, is there a second?
Second, I have my hand up, but maybe I'm off your screen.
Discussion?
Discussion. Chris, aren't those two patrol officers contractual?
They're not minimum manning. They are, they're within the limits of their overall staffing. But one of them, I believe, one of the ones that I suggested was totally inappropriate because there is a contract for the SRO. And I didn't know that. When the school cut the SRO out, I thought that we could eliminate it, and that was wrong.
Yeah, but my concern about the SRO is that the school committee pays half of that salary. And they've already said, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're not willing to pay that half. Is that correct?
So that's what has been some of the information that's out there right now. I don't know what the final disposition from the finance committee from the school that's looking at their budget has come up with. We did get some information from the administration that the budget committee did, but we don't believe that that may be as accurate as what was originally portrayed. So,
Well, I was at the budget committee meetings, and they did say that. They did say that they weren't going to pay for it. Now, I don't know if they've changed their mind, but I do want to say something about this. I was the school committee chairman when we created this role, and we talked the town council into this, and we asked them to pay half, and it was almost a gentleman's agreement that if they pay half, we would pay half. So it really bothers me that they would go back on this because it is for the kids, and of course, we're all a town, and we need to keep the kids safe. But I have to tell you, I was on the school committee when this was all proposed, and I would never have thought the school committee would back off on this because there was real reasons why we needed this. We couldn't afford the whole thing, and we got the town to pay for half. And I think it's totally wrong if they go back on this.
I agree.
Second.
Okay, Donna?
Yeah, well, is the school going to be open? You might not need one.
Well, I think we, I think that the issue is it doesn't really matter because it's a contractually obligated position. It's in the contract. We have it to have it, whether school's open or not. So the bigger question is there's a proposal that would reduce the 2 patrolmen on the police department. And that's about $120,000 in salary. So the question is, are we supportive of that or not? There's a motion in a second. Anybody else have any other discussion on it? John?
Madam President. Yeah, so I would add to that and we probably want to follow it up with a vote, but my suggestion would be that we take the 78,000 for the deputy chief and bring that to 0 as an offset. So it's not like we're adding 120 back in. We're really only adding 50.
you have to add a
And I
police.
agree with that because I think that this isn't the time to add new positions. And I was in contracts and I know that he really wants this.
So can I weigh in on this? Because there is a condition to the deputy, was they did reduce in the budget already 1 position. in exchange for the deputy. So it's not adding a new position. It's, you're actually making an existing, a ranking officer, a deputy, and you're eliminating one position. That was
Yeah.
what my understanding of this was. So
Yeah.
if you eliminate the deputy, you have to add a position back as well.
No, you don't.
I'll
How many
So-
vacancies do we have over there
I'll
now?
confirm that with the chief. Let's,
Okay.
So let's not conflate the subject. So
No.
let's stick to the one that we have in front of us, which are the 2 patrol positions. You know, I of all the things that we have to cut, I hate to cut staff and people. I think that the people are the most important resources that we have in the town. I think that our police department is often running short-staffed as it is. You know, we've got 3 cruisers on patrol at any given time. You know, but, you know, that would be, I think that there are some other things in this budget, certainly where we can find offsets for that. And I think some of us have some ideas for even some potentially larger cuts beyond that. So I'm not really comfortable with that one in particular. If everybody's ready, I would like, unless somebody else has got a comment, can we go to a vote on this? Donna?
I have to take issue with the fact that maybe this promise or this gentleman's agreement was done before the pandemic problem. And I don't think that we need to be, however, that doesn't look good. Secondly, to be adding a new position for $78,000 and some type of agreement that you lost a regular officer, maybe it needs to go back to the way it was, because the regular officer wouldn't make as much money if you wanted to, you know, offset that, because it's different now. And I think it comes under management rights. It's just different.
Are we talking about the SRO, or what position are you speaking?
Well, the SRO is troubling to me too, because now you got the school deciding they're not going to pay half. That's so. And you don't even know if school's going to be open. I don't even know if there's going to be pupils there or not. I have no idea. So I think that the deputy chief position has to be eliminated. The SRO, he could be a regular officer, I guess. And I don't know how much money that would save. I don't know. I can't figure it out in front of me, but to hold us to something that happened before the March situation is totally unfair.
Okay, so can we take a vote on this?
No,
Yes.
I'm confused. I'm confused on what I'm voting for right
We're
now.
voting on only the motion is only regarding the 2 patrol officer positions.
But does that include the SRO?
Well, no, because
Yeah,
the
Chris is
SRO is
saying-
the SRO is a contract. It will be 2 patrol officer positions, but the SRO is required by contract. It's in the police contract. We can't get rid of it, whether or not. But there are 2 patrol vacancies, and essentially we would be just, you know, deciding not to fill these, and the police department would have 2 less patrolmen than they normally would have. And that's the vote. So I'm going to take a roll call vote. Donna?
I'm sorry, I'm too confused to vote.
Okay. Would you like to abstain?
I'm going to abstain. Yeah.
Okay. Steve? Yep, you have to, Steve? Steve?
Sorry?
Okay, there we go.
I do not want to eliminate the 2 positions, so am I voting no to this?
Yes, if you don't want to eliminate them, you'd be voting no.
Wait.
Okay.
No,
No, other way around.
Other way around.
Can we just go back for a second?
Yep.
So the motion on the floor was to restore,
Oh, I'm sorry, to restore. So other way around, yes.
restore the 2 police officers. So Donna, that I don't know if that helps you understand. So the only thing is to restore the 2 police officers that have been recommended to be cut by the Budget Committee. And again, these are only recommendations because these are just because the Budget Committee has the final say.
I think it's a little bit more complex than that, and also what was promised at a time when we didn't have the pandemic, and I'm going to continue to abstain. I don't have enough information or what's really on the table here. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's fine.
So Steve, I guess if you wanted to retain those, you would be voting, keep those positions, you would be voting yes.
I vote yes. Thank you for
Okay.
the clarification.
Nancy?
I need clarification. We went off on a whole thing about the SRO. And how does that factor into this vote at all?
It doesn't.
No.
I mean, I'm sorry to say it, but that sort of turned into a side discussion amongst the number of counselors. So but it really doesn't. This is, the simple question is that the budget committee is recommending eliminating 2 patrol officer positions. And we are taking a vote as to whether or not we would agree with that recommendation or not agree with that recommendation.
Okay, and then just for point of clarification, is there anything on the table about the SRO, not right now, in general about the SRO? And
That'll happen later.
discussion Denise had?
No, it's a contractually obligated position. It exists in the policeman's contract. So unless, our labor attorney tells us there's some option for it. Now, keep this in mind. The SRO, who normally is at school during the school year, in the contract, it says that when they're not doing schoolwork, that they work at the police department as a regular policeman, but they work the same hours. And in other words, you can't put them on midnight to 8 or anything like that. They work Monday through Friday, the same hours that school is open, but at the police station when they're not at school. So it's not as though we're not paying somebody who's literally sitting in an empty school parking lot with nothing to do.
And the budget committee has recommended cutting these 2 officers.
Not the
Our
SRO.
administrator did.
I did.
Oh, you,
And although Chris now Chris is now saying that he's rethought that position and has, yes.
I didn't realize the SRO is contractual, which was an issue. And I had further discussions with Chief Jones, and he fully briefed me on it, that I do believe both positions need to be brought back.
Okay, so can we continue voting?
yes, we can. I'm going to abstain too. I agree with Donna. I don't get it.
Okay, Joe Perry.
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Denise,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Okay, the next item that got brought up then was the captain's position, the deputy chief position.
There was no formal motion, but it sounds like that was part of, that's not something we can do away with. Am I correct?
I was
I
told.
mean, we can recommend this is not binding. The budget committee will make the final decision. That's their job. We're just making a recommendation or not. Now, the budget committee has not recommended cutting that position. So they haven't recommended cutting that position. If someone here wants to recommend it, we can make a motion. If not, we'll move on to the next thing.
I think we move on for now. Come
Okay.
back to it.
So we'll move on to the next thing. And the last thing was the DPW staff position.
Yes.
So,
Madam President,
yes, John.
I'll make a motion that we put back in the budget, the DPW staff position that remains unfilled, with the intent that the council will fill that position, because we need that position when it comes to snow plowing.
Okay. Is there a second
Also-
for that?
Can everyone see this? All right, I'm going to hold this up if you're muted.
I keep doing the tongue on the ear thing like Carol Burnett, like I can't hear you here. So is there a second for that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, so discussion and just Chris, remind us why, before we start, why you thought that we could fill out that position.
I recommend it because it was vacant and we were trying to find any way that we could, worst case scenario at this budget to try to make some savings. And I do recognize that, there are issues with losing that position. And, I also understand the rationale for putting it back. So it's, I think these decisions should be, because it's your budget, it shouldn't be my recommendation. I think it should be yours. I agree with putting it back. I'll do whatever you want, Whatever you want me to advocate for, I'll do.
Oh,
So discussion, Donna?
I think what's missing from this is I don't know where it leaves the DPW as far as being able to carry out its role in the town. To just eliminate an unfilled position, and I don't have any answers as to how that affects the schedule and the work that has to be done. I don't have an answer to that. I feel like I'm blind. I can't just go, okay, well, I just won't fill it, because I frankly don't know if it means they can't follow through with what they're supposed to be doing. I have no idea.
Is Rick here?
I'm not the director. I don't know how it affects the schedule. Does it mean more overtime because the person, there's not a person there? Does it really affect the operation? Does it affect getting anything done?
It would be running with one person less.
Well, how would that work out?
Can I interject here
Sure.
on
Yeah.
how it would impact us? Is that okay? Is that okay, Councilor Cook?
Oh, yeah, I said yes.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so because I've already looked into this. The issue is not where it stands today. It doesn't impact our operations today in the summer months. Where it impacts us is it leaves us short a plow route when we have a winter storm, because now you don't have enough guys to put into the plow trucks. And we already have an issue where we can't find contractors to help fill those positions because of the onerous insurance requirements. So it would essentially mean a route in town, if we have a snowstorm, doesn't get plowed until the other routes are done. And so, I mean, my personal opinion is, if we want to save money, I guess you could leave this position out, because ultimately myself, Madam President Hilton, we're not going to be here when the next snowstorm happens and the council has their phones blown up because, roads aren't getting plowed. But I don't want to leave the next council in that position, my personal opinion.
Joe Perry?
I think it does affect because we lose mowing on the streets, we sing the streets, nobody's able to sweep shorthanded. It does affect all year long, not as nimble right now as it does in the winter.
I stand corrected.
Between the police, which is a safety issue, and the DPW, which is also infrastructure and safety issue for people to get to work or not have accidents, I don't think that's the places to be cutting. I don't agree with new positions, but I'm not for that's health and safety.
And this vacancy only arose out of an early retirement.
In May, yes.
Yeah, so
Okay,
it's a recent vacancy.
Does anyone else have a comment on this? Any of the other counselors? Anybody else have a thought? Okay, in that case, I'm going to go for a vote. And you would be voting yes to recommend that we keep the DPW position. Donna?
Yes, to keep the position.
Nancy?
Yes.
Steve?
No.
Joe?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Denise?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm a no, only because I know we've got to find some savings someplace.
Madam President,
Yes, John.
I have a question about this, and it's probably going to create a small tangent, but I have to ask. So when it comes to roles and responsibilities within the charter, right? I mean, I understand it's the budget committee's responsibility to fund to put together a budget, but
yeah.
I failed to see how it's the budget committee's responsibility to dictate policy to the town council. And if our policy is that we're going to have X number of guys or girls in a department, then it's the budget committee's job to find the money to fund that. It's not their job to turn around and tell us, we're just going to cut a position.
Okay, so hang on a second. And yes, it's true. The budget committee's job is not to set policy. The problem this year is that, we sent over a budget and revenue estimates before the COVID crisis before we found out that our $3 million casino guarantee was not worth the paper it was written on. And before the ancillary loss of additional revenue. So the budget committee doesn't have a choice, given that when you took our original budget, which was a relatively small increase, if you remember, it was not a very big increase. It was, I can't remember what it was. Was it 1 point something percent?
Yeah,
It was well under 2%.
Yes,
Well-
it was when we asked for that originally, it was a relatively small increase, and based on the projected revenues, it didn't seem like it was a whole lot. At the end of the day, however, when you take the casino revenue out and the other ancillary revenue losses, and you factor in what we asked for, and even level funding the schools, it turns out to be like a 7 point something percent over the levy. So the budget committee's in a position where they don't have a choice. They have got to make cuts. And they're not trying to do policy. That's in part why they've said to us and to Chris, and we're having this meeting, okay, we know we have to make cuts to get below the 4%. You know, help us, they're responsible for the decision, but they're asking for our help in determining, you know, what those things could be that the council going forward, you know, could live with at least a little bit easier than some other cuts. That's all they're trying to do here. And frankly, I think it's, you know, great of the budget committee to ask for our input, not to simply say, well, okay, we got to cut, you know, $3 million. Let's just, we'll pick. Chris, you wanted to say something?
So I just want to clarify one thing. The budget committee didn't make those cuts. I walked them into it. All right, it's totally my own. Right? But at the time we were doing this, when I first started meeting with the budget committee, I did explain to them that I had no indication from any of the council members where to go. It was a huge issue of, you know, trying to fill this hole. But I did ask that they at least, when they were done, to sit down with the town council to at least go over everything that they had come up with so that way in. The problem is, as we started to go through this process, it becomes, every suggestion I make is coming from the town council, which is not fair to you. So I thought it was at least appropriate now to come back to you to say, what would you like me to recommend before I start speaking on your behalf? This is your budget. It's not, you know, I'll administer it, but it shouldn't be my role to come in and tell them what to cut, especially when it comes to personnel. So I will take full ownership that those positions were, I walked them right into it, but the same token, I think we need to at least.
No, I don't disagree that we need to participate. I just, it bothers me when we're talking about staffing levels, which is very clearly a function of the council and the administration. And yet we're being handed something that pulled them out there. But I understand it came from the administrator, so I retract my comments.
But John, it's a question of what's drawing it. And every year the budget committee comes up with the budget, the town people vote on it, the town council gives recommendations, it goes to the voters, and then the town council has to live with it and make their policy within the budget committee budget. It's not the town council first, sorry.
Okay, so moving on, those were Denise.
Donna has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Donna.
I think the other issue is that whenever you try to do anything, you run up against the contracts. So that makes it kind of difficult to get right away. There was problems with the police and maybe not the DPW, but basically you're kind of stuck. You don't have any leeway.
Okay, before we get to, I mean, there's a philosophical issue here, but we've also kind of tried.
I apologize.
So can we try and stick to the business at hand so we can get through all of this as opposed to the philosophy behind this, Denise?
Chris, have you talked to any of the department heads regarding the capital? And are they willing to go without something this year?
So there,
because I can think of something.
no, there are a few things that everybody has concerns over. The real issue is, can we get as a council, as a policy board, to set aside whatever does come in and put it in a municipal capital account that the council can then dictate by priority what you believe is the most important things to be spent. That's, we're not going to come with no money in the, the issue is you don't put any gaming money in the budget, but you put gaming money in a restricted capital account that the council then can say, this is what we believe is the priority, spend it here. But you're only going to do it once the money comes in. So they're agreeable to that, I believe, but there are some issues in that capital that really need to be funded. But it would be hopefully with the limited monies that do come in from gaming.
So,
Well, we have to cut something, right, guys?
you have to cut something.
I have some ideas.
I have a couple of ideas. John, did you say you had an idea? So go ahead.
I do. So, assuming that the resolution comes forward the same way it always has, where excess money, I think it's 25%, winds up going into paving and drainage, as it has for years past. My suggestion is that we take the paving and drainage account down to zero and rely solely on whatever overages there are that comes out of that 25% for this coming fiscal year.
So are you making a motion, John?
Yeah, I'll make that motion. So that we take the 200,000 in paving and drainage down to zero and rely solely on whatever money monies are allocated based off of the resolutions at the FTR.
Okay. Is there a second for that?
Second.
Okay, discussion. Denise?
John, keep in mind that this year we spent that account down to zero.
I know. I mean,
Yeah, all the paving projects spent that down to zero. So whatever is left over from last year's budget will go in there, but it's not going to be a huge amount.
totally understand.
I don't know. I really hesitate to do that because of the conditions of our roads, but just keep in mind that there's nothing in that account right now, I believe, or there's plans to spend it between now and the fall.
Also, we should also know that the budget committee has already made a recommendation to reduce the paving account. I'm just looking. We had originally recommended putting $500,000 in there, $500,000, and the budget committee has already cut it down to a recommendation of $200,000. Don?
So I'll just add to my point. And I think, listen, in an ideal world, right, we do $1 million into paving and drainage, but in an ideal world, we would have significantly different revenue picture. And I think, again, any suggestions that we make should be made in the context of this is not a long-term policy. This is how we shore up the gap. And I think knowing that we have contractual obligations, as Councilor Cook said, and we're stuck in a lot of places, I think you have to look at the only other places which are flexible, and paving and drainage is a larger item. And I think that, for 1 year, I mean, it's okay. We don't want to make a habit out of not paving our roads for, years and years at a time. But I think given the situation this year, we got to find money somewhere, and 200,000 goes a long way to closing a $1.3 million gap.
Okay. So anybody else have a comment on paving? Nancy?
Madam President, just taking off what Councilor Edwards just said in a more global way. I think I agree that there are a lot of decisions we make every year on our wish list, and we really have the revenue to find it. And this year, we really need to look at the wish list and decide, all right, this may be a wish list, but we can't do it. We can't do it.
Okay, so we think that bringing paving down to zero, and then whatever paving gets out of the overage in the general fund, which may be, it could be a pretty small amount. Maybe it's a little bit more. I think it depends on what ends up in there at the end of the day. It won't be what we certainly had last year for paving. So there'll be, less paving, probably not too much, but if people feel that we can rely on that, then that's the question. So are there any other comments before we take a vote?
Reaction, but when the American Academy of Pediatrics had said it,
Okay, in that case,
Does somebody have a TV on?
Yeah, it's getting louder too.
yeah,
So
I'm
what,
wondering,
so what is the actual vote now that we're doing?
the vote is to recommend that the budget committee zero out the paving account and instead rely for paving on whatever the 25% of overage in the general fund is.
I don't think we can afford to do that. We're looking for money and then we're gonna do 25%.
It's Donna, it was a resolution that was passed by the voters last year. It's binding.
Well,
There was a resolution on the ballot last year, a binding resolution on the ballot, that if there were any money left in the, excess in the general fund, 25% went to capital, 25% went to paving. So whatever that 25% would be, that's what they would get for paving for the year.
okay.
So I'm gonna take a vote. Donna, are you voting yes or no?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Denise? Denise?
Yeah, I'm thinking, pass me up for a minute.
Well, okay. Steve?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Joe, is that a yes?
Yes.
Denise?
No,
And I'm a no too. But the motion passes nonetheless. So that just subtracted, what did we just subtract out? Another,
We kind of offset the two positions we put back in.
500,000 on our budget.
what?
It
Sorry.
still says 500,000 on our budget.
No, but on the updated docket budget that I have from the budget committee here, I think, what did I just say? They had cut it down to?
200, they went down to 200.
Okay, so that just subtracted another 200 from the budget. Okay. Anybody else have a suggested reduction?
I do.
Donna?
There's no pay raises for the treasurer and the town clerk. They're elected and it's not part of a contract. Decrease money to charities.
Can we sort of do these a little bit one at a time here?
Yeah, I was just looking at what they had worked out on. The only thing that wasn't touched, which needs to be addressed, is the almost $600,000 budget for the library.
Mhm.
You need a waiver for that. That needs to be addressed.
Well, yes, the library would need a waiver. And I don't know, we could ask the town administrator whether or not he could look into a waiver for the library. But I don't think we can make a decision right now because we don't have any information on what that entails.
Could
So
we make,
I can tell you from the league calls that we do every week, every city and town has been asking about maintenance of effort issues as it relates to both schools and libraries. We are hopeful that there'll be something passed through the House and Senate regarding that because of the significant cuts that we've had to deal with. We haven't heard anything or seen anything in other government's budget allowing a reduction of maintenance of effort on either one of those issues.
But they have a
It would
waiver
take-
paper you can make out.
They do, but we're all hopeful that we could see something on a statewide basis instead of every individual city and town going before a waiver process. But that's, I'll do it if that's what you want.
Well, I think that following up, on what the waiver options are would be good. It may not come to us, but you may have an answer and information you can share with the budget committee. If that's an option, depending on what the operating hours are going to be at the library and all that other kind of stuff and their whatever restrictions that they have. So I've got a bunch of hands up, so just be patient. Denise, I think I saw your hand first.
I need a little clarification on this. The town clerk and the town treasurer submits their budget. And I don't think that the town council can make any recommendations regarding their budget. It's against the
Okay.
charter because they're elected officials.
I know, but
So-
we are, but.
So I don't know, I just want to speak for a minute.
Yeah.
Because I really don't think we can touch those. And I was just doing the math, and you're talking the town clerk, you're talking $1,300 we're saving there. And the town treasurer, who does a magnificent job and does over what we should expect from her, you're only talking like 3,800 there. As far as contractual, if you're going to propose, and I don't think you can, to take away the raises on the town clerk and the town administrator, well, and I'm not suggesting this, but I'm just saying it, the department heads increases are not contractual either. It's only the other people. It's only the union people. So we're really like, we're talking about $5,000 we're saving there. And I kind of think it's especially disrespectful to the treasurer who has been here for a long time, who didn't get a raise last year, by the way. I think it's kind of disrespectful. Now the town clerk, Nancy's leaving. I'm sure Nancy doesn't really care. And it's a new position, but like I'm saying, you're saving like less than $1,300 there.
Picking up pennies.
Okay, so
I don't think we can touch this.
I would suggest this, just as an idea. The kind of money that we need to cut, or that the budget committee needs to cut, is pretty significant. So I think that, maybe we should try and focus on bigger ticket items, and then let the budget committee, if they need to, start, the close shave if they need to do that. I don't know that we're gonna get too far if we don't focus on some bigger things. Nancy?
Oh, I agree. But I will say the library was one of my lists, because they're definitely this whole maintenance of effort question, rather than waiting for sort of feedback from the General Assembly or what the League of Cities and Towns are doing. There definitely is a provision. I remember looking into it when I was on the budget committee, that you can get a waiver for maintenance of efforts for certain things, but you have to ask for it. And I would recommend that we be aggressive this year, especially when the library isn't open, everything has changed, to look into what potential waiver we could get for maintenance of effort, because that would be a huge, huge saving.
Madam Vice Chair, I guess you're running the show.
Where'd she go?
I think she had to go get the dog or something.
All right, John, go ahead.
I have two items where I think that we could find some significant money. And it sickens me to suggest this, but given this scenario that we find ourselves in, I think that number one is we already have a massive actuarial liability out there. For OPEB, it's like 20-something million already. What's $100,000 this year going to do? I mean, we still have a huge issue there. So I would suggest we take that to zero. And then the other one, given our funding status, and I'm on the police pension board, if we had to find something, the reason why we are exempt as a municipality from ERISA is because we have the authority to tax. And I'm not suggesting, again, that any of these suggestions are for any more than just a stopgap this year, but we could find some money in cutting down and in not fully funding the ARC. And again, it's a recommended contribution. It's not a required contribution. And I certainly, under any other circumstances, would never recommend this. But I think that, given where we are and the amount of money that we have to cut in order to get to that 4% cap that we're at, there's a good chunk of that $700,000 that we could look at. And believe me, I normally am the first one who would tell you never touch that. In fact, we're underfunding it, but it's just the scenario we find ourselves in this year.
So how do we proceed? We've now had a suggestion for a library, which is a huge amount, maintenance of effort, looking into a waiver, and Councilor Edwards has brought up the OPEC and ERISA. How do we prioritize, and what do we do with this?
Well, I think we can certainly ask the town administrator to look into a waiver for the library.
Yep.
I will.
So we can ask him to do that. John, if you want to make a motion on one or each of these things, and we can have a discussion and determine
So-
whether there's agreement on the contract.
I'll make a motion on the OPEB first, with the stipulation that I think that the administrator needs to look into our contracts, because I believe we do have a required contribution in 2 of the union contracts in the OPEB. But absent that, I think that we should just, for this year, I think we take that to 0.
So which it currently is at what? At
100,000.
Okay, so, so is that a motion? Is there a second?
Yeah, that's a motion.
I'll
Second.
second that for the discussion.
Okay, discussion?
That's, John, that's a relatively new, I think last year, the $100,000 for what you're speaking about. So I always thought it was a loss of money trying to catch up with something you'll never catch up on personally, but I think that's a good idea. The other thing is you talking about the police pension. I think we signed some contract or something with the state that it has to be $700,000 every year. I think I don't know, there was something that we signed and we had to keep putting that in. I was told that for like 3 years now. That's what they expect to have in, and we can't put anything less in. We can put more in, but we can't put anything less in, but I guess we'd have to check on that.
I don't think that's, Mike, the solicitor has something.
So I'm assuming, and I'll have to look into Councilor Cook, but I'm assuming that every town that had an underfunded pension plan had to submit a funding improvement plan to the state, which was approved.
Yes.
And I'm assuming that based upon what your statements are, that under that funding improvement plan that you're required to make that contribution. Now, I don't know if there's any penalty involved. I don't think there is any penalty if you don't meet it, but you probably will not be meeting your plan. You're correct. Your funding improvement plan with the state. But we can check into that.
Okay, that's what I'm concerned with. I don't want to get a fine, which ends up costing us even more money, plus the $700,000 if it's a percent on that.
Okay, hang on a
this,
second.
oh, sorry.
Let Denise go, and then we'll get back to that. Denise, you had your hand up.
Before we do that, the only thing we're talking right now, just to be clear, is the OPEG, the $100,000. That's the
Right,
only-
just the OPEB one.
That's different. Isn't that different?
Yeah,
Correct.
That's
good.
different than the 750.
It is. No, the 100,000 OPEB,
You guys
that's
are
for
really confusing me.
no,
it's other pension and benefits, basically,
Yeah.
like when you,
Right. But
to fund health insurance and retirement.
Right,
for
so
these
that
guys.
100,000 is something over we're contributing. Or
It's,
that we
they're two,
not part of
they're
what Don
Yeah,
is
they're-
talking about.
yeah,
Yeah,
no,
it's
the 100,000 for OPEB is a separate trust, and that
Yes.
money is set aside, and the idea is that you would have enough money there to cover the liabilities that you incur for retirees. As retirees separate from service in the contract, where we're obligated to pay for, say, health insurance for a retiree or life insurance, through a specific period of time. And those that right now our actuarial liabilities for OPEB is like $22 or $25 million. So, $100,000 now, time in the market would eventually grow and help offset some of that. But ultimately, in the short term, right, the reason why we were able to promise these benefits and never fund them is because as a municipality, we are not subject to the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, meaning we have the authority to tax. So in theory, if we get to retirement and we have, let's say it's $1 million in payments to health insurance for retirees, the municipality just goes and increases taxes to offset that liability. It's smart financial practice to set the money aside, but given where we are this year, I think that that's an area where I think we can realize some short-term savings. And it's going to hurt us in the long term, but it's some short-term savings now.
Okay,
And it should go back next year.
Nancy?
I think an overriding suggestion is something that just occurred to me as I'm listening to our discussion, that the budget committee is looking to us for some kind of guidance as to how to go about doing their job. And it seems like we're coming out globally with a concept that if it's health, safety, immediate health safety stuff, no, don't make the cuts. If it's stuff that there are avenues that we can look into because of this exceptional year, of either like the library, getting a waiver of maintenance of effort, or the OPEC, the stuff we're talking about right now, that we're looking at the recycling center, that we're looking as a one-shot deal to just getting some relief, go for it. And we'll do everything we can from the town's point of view to hopefully effectuate going for it, like getting a maintenance of effort for the library, level funding the schools, that kind of stuff. I don't know if that's sort of a global way I'm looking at it, but that's what's coming out in
Very
my
much.
mind.
I think that's pretty much it. So we have a motion on the OPEB to reduce the OPEB for this year to 0. So unless there are any other comments, can we take, assuming that both the solicitor and the town administrator will confirm with any of these things that we wouldn't be in violation of any legal obligation by removing them. So with that caveat, John?
Oh, yes. I think Madam Vice Chair did have her hand up.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Okay, John, Steve,
Yes.
Denise,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Okay,
Now
so
we're up to 700,000.
Could I also make a motion to have, I don't know if we did it already, but to have the maintenance of effort waiver thing looked into for the library?
yeah, I mean, I don't think we need to have a motion. I think we can just, I think Chris is aware that the council generally agrees by consensus and that he's going to do that.
I'll look into it.
Okay, so John, so you're Denise, I'm sorry, go ahead. I was going to ask John what he
John,
said.
have any more suggestions?
Well,
I do.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Did you want to make
Because I do too.
on the second pension one or no?
So, God, it hurts. I think given where we are, if they had to find some additional money, I think that's the only place you got to look. Would be the police pension plan. And again, this is funding, and it's the same thing that we just discussed with OPEB, where we have an actuarial liability. We have a promise to pay. We're required to pay because that's the plan set up as, and that's the contract that these guys signed. It's just whether or not we'll have the money when they get to retirement. And given where we are this year, and it goes against everything that I believe in too, as far as DB plans go. But I really think that's where you're gonna have to find the money. That's the only other major line item in this budget that I think you can make a serious impact to close the budget gap in.
Aren't we ahead on that right now?
Can I ask one question about the police pension plan though? Because I've heard that we have a number of retirements coming this year. So are we in a position to do that?
Well, so here's the thing with the police pension, and I can spend a lot of time talking about this because it's what I do for work. But what we do is we're actually paying those retirees out of the plan assets. So the idea is that the $700,000 goes in, it gets invested. Some of what's invested gets liquidated to pay off, to pay the obligations. In a perfect world, the 700 would just go to pay off obligations, for the retirees, and when we let the money grow. But that's not how it's working. It's definitely going to impact our funding percentage in the short term. But assuming that Washington Trust can continue doing what they're doing in the markets, a one year reduction, won't kill us, but it's certainly going to hurt us in the back end.
Yeah, I have to admit, I'm not crazy about this idea, especially because depending on where this pandemic goes, I don't know where the markets are going to go. We own that pension.
Sideways.
It makes me really uncomfortable.
Listen, it makes me uncomfortable too, but if we're trying to make up 1.3.
I know, you either gotta have the money or you don't.
And it's not like the pension plan is going to run out of money next year. That's if we don't do it this year. And ultimately, what we're really talking about here is that we're not going to tax a little bit this year, and we're going to have to tax a lot in later years to offset what we're doing here today. That's what it boils down to.
Yeah. All right. So there's a motion. Is there a second for the motion?
Okay.
What's your motion exactly? I'm sorry, John, to cut it to what? To
God. I was hoping you wouldn't ask me to put a number on it.
If we don't have a number, we can't really make a recommendation to the budget committee, or we should wait on it till later.
Can we come back to this one when we see what the final
Okay.
amount is? We got to close. I mean,
We'll come back to that one.
I hate to say go to zero, but
Okay. Denise?
I have a question. This is like a general question. The budget committee has to cut how much from the whole budget, including school and town?
Well, they've already cut a bunch, but to get down below the 4% cap, they've got, to get below the 4% cap, they've still got another 1.3 to cut.
We have just already given them 700,000.
How do you figure?
You got it back 185,
Yeah,
Am I wrong?
145. We had it back to three
Recycle, how much
positions.
did we save there?
So there's 250 there, there's 200 in the paving, and there's 100 in OPEB, and then you add back the 185.
Then you have the library.
Wait a minute,
we
I'm
haven't-
confused. What did you say there is in paving, Chris?
So paving cut 200.
No, I thought we put it to zero.
we did.
It wasn't,
But the budget committee had already cut it from, they'd already cut it, and we're cutting it further.
we're suggesting they cut.
Very confusing, by the way.
Well,
So
because
what cuts have they made so far? Has it all been town?
well, and
No,
level,
because they
and level funding the
they
schools.
level,
So
All right, so I'm really sorry, but usually on Thursdays I'm on call and that's where I was today. But my question is, so is that all, now the cuts you're counting is also this level funding the schools? So they've already subtracted that.
yes, that's it.
yes.
And what is the total of that? Does anyone remember or know?
About
So they're what? It's I just did the math. We're using round numbers, we've essentially found $365,000 that would be lopped off of the, what is it, 1.3? Sorry, it's 1.294 is the number that they need to cut. So they, we still have to suggest out of our budget close to another $1 million.
Okay, so I'm gonna throw out I'm gonna throw out a bigger one here, and I'm gonna try and explain this in a way that doesn't make it too complex. We don't know for sure, but there's a possibility that the DEM is going to let us continue to use the landfill after November. Here to see if there isn't a way that we can keep the landfill open a little bit longer. And if we could just keep the landfill open, even if it were till July 1st of next year, that would be an enormous help and would get us through this budget year. Because the proposed cost for trash this year is $1.1 million. And that's because we'd be closing the landfill and we'd be taking the trash to Johnston, and we'd have to pay the transport fee and the tipping fees in Johnston. If the DEM will let us at least stay open until July, which is not that long an extension, if they can just find some room in the design for a little bit more trash, then we would be able to stick with this year's existing trash number, which may or may not be, it may end up actually being a little bit less than what is in there for this year, just based on the way that we financed the trash the last time. So I'm just looking to see what.
It's 738,400.
Okay, so it was 738,400. This would be my suggestion. My suggestion is we recommend to the budget committee, and by the way, I would have Chris call MEGA just to ask them, get a ballpark, because we're gonna have to go out to bid again on the trash contract anyway for December. But, ask MEGA, if they were to bid again, is their number kind of similar to the original bid number or this modified finance number? Anyway, if we funded trash at the original 700 number, we don't fund it at 1.1, we fund it at the 7 number. If DEM gives us the opportunity to keep bringing trash at least through July 1st, then we would save a considerable amount of money, because right
420.
now in the budget at 1.159.
That's 420,000.
So that's $420,000. And I'm cautiously optimistic that the DEM is going to help us out here.
Second.
I agree.
And I do think we're going to get someplace with this, because I will tell you, one of the things that the budget committee is looking at is just, I mean, trash is, if you've got to come up with $1.3 million, just cutting trash is an easy thing to do. And I don't think people want trash to be cut. And it's one of the few places where the buying power of the government actually really benefits the citizens, because you can't get private trash pickup for anywhere close to what we pay per household, just by virtue of the buying power that, 6,000 or 7,000 households have at one time. Worst case scenario, and I realize I'm saying this, that when worst case scenario comes, I won't be on the council, but worst case scenario, if DEM comes around after we've passed the budget and says, nope, sorry, no extension, you're closing the thing in November. At that point, the council could consider adopting the Middletown model. And in Middletown, they have a model, they have municipal trash pickup. But the way that it works is that, yes, in Middletown, they have pay-as-you-throw bags, so you have to buy pay-as-you-throw bags, although they put the pay-as-you-throw money towards the cost. But then you also, it's $142 a family per year to sign up. Most families do. So there's an additional sign-up charge to belong to the municipal trash program. If the council really had to, and they had to pay to truck the trash to Johnston, the council could absolutely consider that model. And if it's a relatively small number and it comes out to be $10 a month per household to keep the trash going, I actually think that people would be okay with it. So I'm
How
going
many
to.
households do we have in town?
What?
How many households do we have in town? Do we know?
So there's like 7,500 or something single family homes. And I want to say there's close to 7,000 customers, 7,000, people who have trash pickup.
So, Madam President, just to, if it's 7,000 people that participate, if the program were to charge $60 a year to be a part of, that makes up the difference between what we would be pulling out of the budget.
Right. So what I'm saying is that would give the council, there'd be if worst case scenario, if DEM says no, the council would have an option by ordinance to institute a program like that to keep trash pickup going without creating a budget crisis. So therefore, my proposal is that we recommend that the budget committee fund trash at the existing 738 number, not the 1.1 million number.
Second.
Okay.
Oh, brainer.
Any discussion?
No.
Denise?
You're muted, Denise.
John, I did that so you
hoping
could use your sign. All right.
Tonight.
I did that on purpose, John. All right. When is our contract done with Mega?
December.
I believe it's
December?
December.
Okay.
They
We'll
have
keep-
provisions in it to extend it, but you should probably go out to bid anyhow. But I will call them to find out if there's any relief in there.
Right, but I mean,
beyond.
I would imagine we're going out to bid in December because, quite frankly, I'm not that satisfied with Mega. And I know that the town residents aren't, and I think we should look at what else is out there. I mean, we might not find anything better, but we've had a lot of complaints recently, and I think that we should definitely go out for for bid. So if we put out the bid for that amount, somebody may come in at that. Correct?
Maybe.
Is that the answer me?
Roll
Anybody
the
else?
dice.
John?
You have-
So just so we're all clear, if this moves forward, there's 509,000 left to get to the cap number, roughly.
Okay, so anybody else have any comments on this proposal? Okay, in that case, I'm gonna go to a roll call vote. John,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Denise,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes,
Nancy,
It's a no-brainer.
and I'm a yes. Okay, so here's another question, and I know that this one is a little bit touchy, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. And I don't have a proposal on the number, but you know, our current budget right now for the senior center is $121,000 a year. And right now, the senior center is not really open. That doesn't mean, I know that Janet is working hard and doing certain things, and I am not disputing the support that's coming out of there. But, and I don't know that I can come up with a number, but I'm wondering if we would want to ask the town administrator to look at that budget and realistically determine whether or not there's some savings in there, because, you know, I don't know when the senior center is going to be able to open safely. I don't, you know, we're not running the bus right now. I don't know whether or not we're going to be able to do that until we have until we have a viable vaccine, and, you know, older people feel more comfortable being able to congregate in a group. And, or, you know, to this day, we haven't gotten a penny yet back from FEMA on any of our COVID expenses. And anything that you run like that gets a lot more expensive, because the cleaning and sterilization requirements start to get, you know, they get expensive. So
I do.
I don't have a number, but I'm thinking that maybe we could ask Chris to really look at that realistically and see whether or not, I mean, does it make sense to have Janet come and work from town hall as opposed to, you know, paying to eat and keep that building open all the time? I don't know, but $121,000 budget it's not nothing, and I think it's worth looking at. Donna, Nancy, I'm sorry.
Can I ask a question? So I have a soft spot in my heart for the senior center because I love what all these ladies do, meeting down and doing the knitting and the sewing and the quilts and the blah, blah, blah. And I remember when I was on the budget committee, they actually bring revenue into the town. I understand that they're probably not being able to meet as they did down in the basement doing their sewing, but are the individual people out there still, you know, contributing their quilts and their sweaters and their hats to have a sale? I just don't want to cut any of their activities short, because I think it's incredibly meaningful for the people and helpful for the town.
But
I would agree. I just don't really know what, I honestly don't know what right now activities, I just don't know.
But I think that's really important to find out, because I think these activities are amazingly meaningful to the people involved in them.
yeah,
Okay.
I
Donna?
yeah, in deference to Patricia, it really is very difficult for, I'm just going to say, to bring that subject up. But it does need to be spoken about, because basically, yeah, okay, they do knitting and they do this and that, and it is lovely, but they can't do it now. And we have a whole
My question though, Don.
Hang on, Nancy, please. Donna has the floor.
So it's not something they can do now. It's very, very sad, because it gives them a chance to meet each other, and they're not able to do it. So they're alone a lot, and it's very sad. But the fact of the matter is they can't do it. So to keep a building open, just doesn't make any sense to me. To have a Janet be available to them through the phone, or have an office at the town hall or something so that she's there for them, would save a lot of money. It's not a popular thing to do, but I think it's just not being used right now because it's not safe.
Joe?
Because I just talked to them today, and the thing they're doing is they are still doing wheels. So they are something there, not all day, but they are wheels for these.
I think, I think my request would be for the town administrator to work with the senior center director and let the town administrator make a recommendation based on, the activity level that the senior center director, feels is safe and appropriate for the residents of the community that use it, and then, look at the budget and see whether or not there are reductions that can be made there, simply because I think of everything, that particular group of folks, and technically I'm in that group, I guess, until there's a vaccine, are, probably at the most risk, and therefore, less likely to be in a social congregate setting until it's a little safer for them. So that would be really my suggestion to Chris, would be to look at that budget and see if there are any savings there. Denise?
Okay.
Chris, is this, and this is probably a touchy subject too, but is the director and the assistant director still working full-time? Like, what
The
did they
director is
do?
working full-time.
Yeah.
How about the
She's still there.
assistant director?
I don't know. I'll go sit with, that's one department I have not really dealt with at all since I've been here. I mean, I know that they've been very busy dealing with the meals, and they are still dealing with the health insurance of a lot of the seniors. She does meet with them, whether it's on the phone, and she does do some in-person meetings, but I will sit with her and go through exactly what, the issues are over there, and hopefully come up with some cuts.
And then, Nancy?
So, on the same vein, as you're raising the senior center, Donna mentioned, and we haven't sort of discussed it, but I know it was a subject that came up often when we were on the budget committee, is the civic appropriations. And I sort of hesitate to bring it up, and it's not a huge amount of money, but it's much more than the senior center, frankly. And a lot of these places, like the visiting nurses in the East Bay, I remember researching it. You can't believe the endowment these places have. And to think that our little town of Tiverton, the 5,000 we give them, or the 300 or 500, whatever it is just a drop in the bucket. I mean, we're talking huge endowments and monies. So I think that's another place that takes looking into at this point. I just don't see why we as a town are giving money to East Bay, visiting nurses. I can see doing local stuff in Tiverton, but not these big organizations that have directors are making $250,000 a year. It's insane.
I have to say on those, I think I'd like to, I defer those to the budget committee. I think our focus should be the things that affect the council in terms of recommendations, and certainly the budget committee, can take that up if they feel they need to. Denise?
They're looking for recommendations, and that would be one of mine.
Chris, are you looking for more recommendations?
Yeah, yes, I am, because where
I'm
are
going
we now,
to,
John?
I'm going to capital now.
509,000.
Okay.
This is not going to be a real lot of money, but I'm looking at capital right now, and I don't know if you all have a budget in front of you, but do you remember the Lucas chest compression discussion with the fire department? And the reason
All that
why
been cut.
They've
But-
already, budget committee's
already
already
out.
covered it all.
It has.
Yeah.
All right.
All of it.
Well, this is another thing that's going to make Patrick call Chris tomorrow. I'm looking at the car. He's buying one car with grant money because he wanted two. And then he decreased it to 50,000 and he's going to buy a 2019.
That's cut.
They already cut that car?
Yeah, so if you look, budget committee recommendation, that's the numbers, that's the line we're working off of. So
The
literally
budget
everything.
committee's already
everything's out.
recommended
I don't
cutting.
have what you're looking at then.
Email to you.
The
That's
budget
okay.
committee has recommended cutting every single capital item with the exception of a small amount of money for the recycling center.
All right, then my next question is, did they cut the school committee's capital? And I'm going to try to find what you're looking at.
Yes,
Yes.
there's
Okay.
no.
It was
capital
an email.
Denise, I'll
Denise, it was
email
an
you.
email I sent.
Let me look for it. I might have it. But
So-
go ahead.
So here's the only other thing. I don't know that it's a huge number, but it's worth asking. You know, when we signed the recent AFSCME contract, we increased the hours for the AFSCME staff everywhere. I know that at the police station, the CCOs were already working 40 hours a week. I do know that with the COVID thing, you know, town hall hours have been limited, although I hope that town hall will be able to open up a little bit more. But I also know that there was some discussion amongst the employees about moving to, 36? They went from 32 to,
38, was it?
Half to 35.
Right.
35.
to 35 hours. And I'm
right.
hoping town hall will be open more, but I'm not sure whether or not we're going to, at least at this point in the crisis, get to the open evenings thing and all that other kind of stuff. So I wonder if, just because I know that some of the employees weren't crazy about the idea, whether or not AFSCME would consider rolling back the back to the 32 hours for, at the very least, the town hall employees, assuming that the town hall employees were happy with it, at least for this year, because I think there could be some savings there.
Not a
Okay,
lot.
I'll ask.
John?
I'll inquire.
Can I offer another suggestion?
Yeah.
And it starts with a question for our solicitor. Mr. Solicitor, do you have resources in your very large firm surrounding labor law? Do we lose the solicitor?
What's the
Can you put
question?
up your sign?
Oh, Tim?
Oh, there he is.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
What's-
Yeah, you'd need him.
We have a labor department, but go ahead.
So you have a labor department. My question is, within the $100,000 town solicitor budget, can we 86 our labor council line item, take that to zero? That's 35,000, and rely on our solicitor and his firm to do that function for us.
He wasn't hired to do that.
Let me just say this. That's obviously up to you, but so that would mean that I would be that someone in my firm would be performing labor services within the total budget that we previously bid upon, and therefore that would reduce the amount of time that we could be devoted to the town side of stuff.
Gotcha. Okay. Just a question. Never mind. I think I have my answer.
Can I make one? This is not my role, and I don't want
But
to.
we're open to all suggestions, Mike, so please go ahead.
So I did text Chris. So all I can tell you that in East Providence, we are considering opening up the labor contracts and asking individuals to go any contractual raises they're getting or scheduled to get for this year. I know that's probably, but that's that's where the money is in salaries and personnel, and that doesn't mean they have to, they could be approached and asked. All unions, not just not particular, all unions could be asked to indicate, given the situation that we're in, whether or not they would be able to forego a raise until next fiscal year. This is and I shouldn't say just East Providence, all communities that they're talking about, that hasn't really come up publicly yet, but that would require reopening the contract.
And, you know, I think that it's not anybody's first choice, but, you know, we are gonna have to close this budget gap somehow. And I think we made a bit of a dent tonight, right? And we may have enough left in the general fund, but we're, you know, running out of runway here. Donna?
I don't know, I don't remember this being spoken about, but I'm looking at the budget and I'm looking at, capital reserve restricted as $173,084, is it $94 remaining balance? Is that money?
What line is that? Which line is that?
It's
Which line?
page 14. It's 9999 is the.
I don't see it on page
Oh.
14.
That's not in the budget. That's gonna be another document. That's gonna be the expenditure run.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
So that's a restricted account.
but it does have $173,000 in it for reserve capital. Is there any way to, we can't touch it, right?
Yes, you
Don't
can.
think you can.
We can?
You can touch it for capital,
Yes. Which is,
but what does yellow it all out?
Well, if that's, well, I mean, for just to be sitting there and you've yellowed out all the capital, but that's all you can use for capital, unfortunately, maybe we should, I don't know what to do, but there's a lot of money sitting there.
So I mean, you know, the council can decide to use that for capital. Nancy?
I hate to raise this issue, but I need to have you recommend increase to the budget committee for the election account and for the FTR account.
I think they're already in there, Nancy.
Why the FTR account, Nancy?
Yeah, why the FDR?
The prior resolutions on the prior FTR was that you cannot carry forward those funds. Now, the FTR was supposed to happen in May. It has not happened. So on June 30th, I can't carry funds forward. So this year I'm going to have 2 FTRs, one in whatever we have this one, May, September or whenever, and then again in May. So I am going to need funds to handle that.
So
I have
Nancy,
suggested at this next council meeting on your FTR resolutions that you might want to consider using that restricted elected account already is restricted for elections, and should there ever be a runoff on an FTR. I would suggest that for next year only, we consider that restricted for elections and any shortfalls on the FTR, because it's not going to only cost me the 11,000 that it normally costs me.
Nancy, it's already in the budget.
Yeah, but I don't know how much that's going to cost me. I may need 2 buildings to run an FTR. I have no idea.
No, but well, you're asking for the increase. It's already there. It's 23,000, not 11,500.
It's already in the.
Doesn't need to go above
I
that.
already put it in. I had spoken to the budget. Okay, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
no, that's already in their recommendation.
However, even that 23 may not get me through 2 FTRs. That
Well,
just
I mean,
doubled up my FTR money, but it's costing me more to do these. Just for the protection stuff they have to have, just for the increase in poll workers. And I don't know with these restrictions, if we had an FTR tomorrow, that I would be able to do it all in one location. Because I don't know, I could keep the distance. I don't know how many people would show up. I don't know if there'd be an alternate budget. There's too many ifs out there. So what they did by putting 23 is they're allowing me the two 11,500. They are not allowing for the fact that how, if we got 3,000 people to go, would I possibly do that under these conditions in one building?
Okay.
I think that,
I mean, but Nancy, I'm not sure what we do. I don't think we can guess on a number. I think you would just have to find it in the contingency fund or something.
That be up to the budget committee to answer.
Yeah.
It's
well,
really.
no, but I would say that the resolution might help if that
We're
gets.
not doing
But
resolution.
secondly, they increased my election account is at 50,000. I have, it's a wild guess that that would even cover the primary. I don't think will be a big expense because we only have one primary, but the general election, the legislation has passed this early voting type measure. I'm not sure that that's going to cover, even with my carry forward. The presidential preference cost me more than I thought it would be. I'm just telling you, so if you want to make up the difference in contingency money or wherever, but elections run up tallies quick. And we will have the election.
Nancy, I think since it's your budget, you need to talk to the budget committee about that. Like
I
you should
I
talk to
agree.
them.
All right, I'm just letting you know there will be increase there.
But I think that might be a thing that something you need to talk to them about. Denise? Denise?
Yeah, I'm here. So yes, now I have the document. Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
So I guess I want to go back to what I was saying. Have they taken anything from the general fund? Because I'm
Million.
trying to
$1 million.
1 million. Okay. Oh, that's right. You told me. Because we've brought it down a lot, guys. And now that I'm looking at what they did, let's be honest here. We really went down a lot from the original administrator's request way back, whenever that was. I think we're down a lot now, and I don't want to be responsible for taking out anymore. Because now that I've looked at this, we are cut to bare bones. We really are.
We actually
And-
cut beyond that.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, I think that's
beyond that, definitely.
I think there's a little bit more, not big numbers, but I've looked through the fire department medical physicals that we fund at $12,000 or $14,000 every year, and no one ever takes one of those physicals.
They're all doing it now.
They are.
We're all doing it now, yeah.
Of course,
You're
Coronavirus.
but
You're getting into the weeds of the budget committee.
but we're getting into the weeds of the budget, and I think that the budget committee can look at those things. I think our goal tonight was to look at their recommended cuts and see if whether or not we supported them and whether or not we had any other suggestions for sort of some bigger potential reductions, not to kind of nickel and dime through the budget, because certainly that they can try and look at the smaller items and see what they can do. Chris, you have your hand up?
I have one question, and it falls under DPW, but it's really not DPW. It's the on-site wastewater compliance program. I don't know a whole lot about, I know that I'm going through this issue with the septic system loan program. Is it a contractual issue that we've done with the wastewater to do this?
No.
No, but it is, so Chris, it's technically the municipality's responsibility to do this. We have abdicated that, and wastewater has picked it up. Wastewater is doing it for us. So if wastewater doesn't do it, we have to do it.
Okay.
And that I mean, honestly, that's not enough. It's not enough money for wastewater to even do what they're supposed to be doing. I think, if in a perfect world, they're probably looking for, $90,000 or $120,000 a year from us. So at most, all they can really do is issue notices that, hey, you have to get your stuff inspected. But it is the municipality's responsibility. And, we talked about, making Rhode Island DEM upset. That's another area where we can help make them upset.
Okay, I just wanted to, I wasn't sure, I don't know anything about why we're, I know they do some work, I just wasn't sure if the council had more information about it than I do. So I was just, if there was a way to cut money there too, I was looking for it, so. All right, that's all.
Chris, is there, never mind. Have we decided what to do about this chat room where we're seeing comments?
I don't,
Why
even, I don't even open them, so.
Are we getting them?
Are you getting any?
Yes.
What?
Yes.
What
But
is
I'm
it?
not sure how I'm getting this.
Yeah, but isn't
All right,
it
it's fine.
an OMA problem that you can't really talk about it?
Yeah, I
No,
don't want to say anything right now. It's fine.
I try to ignore them after we were told not to. Somebody told me that we shouldn't entertain them during meetings.
I think it was Mike. Mike said it was an OMA problem.
I don't
No.
remember.
Yeah,
No,
but I think
Mike wasn't there, but we asked Andrew to turn off, or Chris to turn off the Zoom chat comments because people were commenting to counselors privately that other people who weren't participants in the webinar couldn't see.
Right.
All right, I do want to tell you though, I think it's open somewhere where people besides us are seeing them. There's a live chat open somewhere.
Is it YouTube? Because I don't watch the
It
YouTube.
might be YouTube. No, it says live chat with all our pictures on it, and it's from this evening, and there's comments.
Okay.
I think it's YouTube. I don't think it's Zoom.
All right.
I was just wondering if anybody was seeing this. Okay.
Okay. Does
No.
anybody else have any items that they'd like to bring up for the budget committee, John?
So I have a couple of general questions, right? Because I know, and obviously it's not our domain, but hopefully the budget committee is looking at this because I know that the school department made significant cuts over there. So even level funding, I wonder to what extent there's money that they're going to carry forward in their budget to help make up some of that difference, and whether or not that's going to ultimately impact the municipality and the budget that we've got. And then the other question I have is related to the revenues that were proposed, because it seems like they cut some stuff. I'm not really sure what the reasoning for it was. Like they reduced our revenue, like on investment income as an example. I don't know why. Like it went from 150.
Which one is it?
4415 investment income.
So the investment income was cut because of the deferment of some of the collection for when we did the May, we let people pay later, and then we're also deferring for 10 days now. But the interest rates have also dropped precipitously to the point where it's like less than 1%. So she's not even generating any money.
Oh, okay. So that's just like a bank account, basically. Like,
Right, it is. So
okay.
it's the amount of investments that she has that she can actually flip over. She's not making any money on that. She came before the budget committee and explained some of these revenue cuts came from the treasurer.
Gotcha. And then the parks program too. What was that all about?
The parks program was because they're not doing the summer
Summer recreation.
Okay.
Yeah, where the kids, they pay for that. And so because we're not doing it, there's no revenue coming in for it.
All right. So, I mean, basically what we gave them tonight was, instead of being 1.294 over, the 4%, now they're 509,000, give or take, over the 1% if they took all of our suggestions at face value.
And there's still some money in the general fund, so it's.
And that's without, touching the ARC or anything on the police pension.
Okay.
Which
So
I would be loath to do.
And I will look into the library thing too, if that helps, if there's a way to get away with for that. We'll look at that as well. Nancy, you're muted.
Sorry, my grandchild was screaming in the background. That would be huge, Chris.
Okay.
Okay. If there aren't any other suggestions, I think that, again, these are not binding on anybody or any place, but that the budget committee may find them helpful. We hope they do. But obviously we've got a really tough year ahead of us. And as much as, nobody wants to consider it, we still may have a potential hole. And that means, cuts that are, going to be even less popular, and, the real possibility that like East Providence and some of the communities are, we may have to talk to some of our unions to get through this for this year. So,
Patricia, when is the budget committee meeting again?
Tonight,
No,
So-
no, they're not meeting tonight.
no, oh,
rescheduled, I think they're meeting next
next
week.
Thursday.
Next Thursday.
Then
Next
it's
Thursday? Okay.
So, we'll, transmit our thoughts over to them. Chris will try and get answers on a couple of the other things that we brought up. And, we've tried to do the best we can with what we've got. So,
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, second.
there's a motion and a second. All in favor of adjournment? Aye.